Hey guys, what's up? I know it's been a while since I've uploaded a video. I have not died. I've just been insanely busy, and I've been restructuring how I want this channel to look. Starting with, it is a new name. Velvet Ear is now Produce Guitar Pop. Basically, nothing else is changing. I just felt like as I was going through like my music production career under Velvet Ear, I feel like this channel has kind of taken a life of its own separate from my production career, and it's like serving a very specific need other than people who just want to hire me to produce their record. So I felt like a rebrand was in order. Also, I'm in the middle of working on courses and tone packs, things that people have been asking for a while. So if you're interested in any of that, go to produceguitarpop.com or go to the link in the description, and there's an email list you can join for any updates on that. And like I said, content of the channel is pretty much going to stay exactly the same. I have a McG remake video in the works. Next week's video is most likely going to be the difference between the indie pop world of 1975 and the band Camino. That's going to be fun. But today I want to do a video on this topic that I've been thinking about a lot, and I actually had a conversation with one of my clients, Ryan, about this, and we had a really fruitful discussion, and so I figured I might as well put it in video format so that everyone else can benefit from it. And it is the topic of how do you find your sound as an artist? Like, even in like the 70s or the 80s, it was not an easy thing to like find your sound as a band, and that was when you were signed to a label. You had artist development teams that were specifically there to help you work on your sound, and all of that has disappeared now. And now people who are indie artists today, who are primarily self-producing, self-writing, and sometimes even self-mixing and mastering, it can be really difficult to distill like what is your sound. And to be clear, I don't feel like I have like discovered this ancient tome of wisdom. I feel like there's some general principles that we can go through that will help most people in their journey of finding their sound. And the first thing that I want to emphasize is that this is going to take time. I know that should be a given, but I feel like a lot of people put this pressure on themselves to like find their sound right now, or that there's some process they can go through to like sort of speed run this process of like finding out who they are artistically. Like, I think it's super important that when you're going into this world, you have realistic expectations, because if you are thinking that you are going to be able to develop your sound as an artist completely from scratch within a few months, you're going to be very disappointed and discouraged. Like, this is not going to be like a week-long thing or a month-long thing. This is going to be like multiple years of your life, which, if that seems overwhelming to say up front, you stick to the end. There is like a sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Like, at the end of the day, you having a sound as an artist is going to be the result of development, like artistic development. And development by definition like requires a long period of time. It's going to take several iterations of you trying stuff in order to eventually find what you feel is your sound. Like, we're not looking to find a specific destination with your sound. What we're going to be doing is trying to define what the northern star is that you are going to be following consistently. And finding your northern star is also like very project specific. Like, every artist that I know has some kind of like side project that is different from their main project, and they have completely different northern stars. Like, the creative northern star for Anthony Green's new acoustic record is not going to be the same creative northern star as Circa Survive or Seosin. Now, that might sound overwhelming for some people, of like, oh man, do I need to develop like multiple different sounds? And the answer is no. It's just that every step that you have taken thus far in your creative journey is also going to be reflected in projects moving forward. And you can see it as every creative venture you have had, whether it was being obsessed with Daft Punk when you were 14 or getting into indie folk for a summer when you lived in Montana. Like, all of those things in your life have been steps forward in your creative journey, even if you didn't realize that they were. In other words, it's really easy to be really tight-fisted and to get stressed out thinking, oh man, I really need to like hone down and like find my sound, when in reality, you've already been working towards your sound, which goes to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is the point that nobody is actually original. One of my favorite books ever is Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, which talks about the very dirty secret that a lot of artists know, which is that every artist on planet Earth got into making art because at some point they saw somebody else making art and they were like, oh, I want to do that too. Like, in order for something to be truly original, like actually original, it needs to have, by definition, an absence of any external influences. Like, the only person who can say that they have completely original music is if there was some boy in a cave somewhere who like got abandoned in the woods when he was a baby and was raised raised by wolves his whole life. And like in the darkness of the cave, he like created a guitar and started making music from it. Like that kid can say he's original and no one's influenced him. But like for me as a guitar player, the reason I learned how to play guitar was because I saw other people play guitar. When I started taking guitar lessons, the first thing they did was have me learn songs from other artists. And it's the same thing with music production. I wanted to make stuff that sounded like Skrillex and Owl City, which is really funny to say in 2024, but it's genuinely why I started learning Reason. And when you're in the process of trying to find your sound, the idea of trying to find something that is completely original is like such an impossible standard. Nobody can actually attain that standard. Because like prior to the age of the internet where you can just kind of hear anybody's music ever, like the winners of battles are the ones who are writing history. And what I mean by that is if you find a record that sounds so original and so unique, it's just like nobody sounds like this. When you're not in that context, it can be really easy to think that this was just like some jewel that formed out of nothing, or that these songwriters were just like the second coming of Jesus. But then you look at them in the historical context and you realize actually there were a lot of people around them who had a very similar sound. Like I'm from the Seattle area and I love Nirvana. I genuinely love Nirvana. I think I would be crucified if I said I didn't love Nirvana, but Nevermind is actually really good as a record. But a lot of people don't realize there was like a pre-existing like punk scene in Seattle that was a bit slower and grimier, like long before Nirvana ever became a thing. And when you listen to a lot of the records of like those late 80s punk bands that Kurt Cobain and Dave Grohl actually were listening to, like you can hear those influences in Nirvana. Since we are now in the year 2024, it's easy to look at a record like Nevermind and think that it was this jewel that popped out of nowhere and that the artistic value of that record is the fact that nothing ever sounded like it. But like if you watch a lot of old Nirvana interviews, they are constantly referencing a bunch of old punk bands that they loved seeing in Seattle. They were not touting themselves as being this brand new sound that nobody else sounded like. They were just making music that they wanted to make, which another thing to point out is if you start going down the rabbit hole of I only want to make something that sounds completely original, you then fall into the trap of making music for other people. When you're sitting down and you're just like making music and you're playing guitar, you are now in this really weird place of I'm trying to write a guitar lick that sounds original, but everything I know about the guitar I have learned from studying other guitar players. And so if there's anything that I consciously recognize as being something that sounds similar to someone else, then I have to throw it out almost out of principle. And it's just like that's not how people actually make music, because at that point you are just circumventing expression and like communicating and connecting with other people for the sake of egotistical originality. Like being an artist that doesn't sound like anybody else in any way gets you brownie points with basically yourself. And there's actually a strength to owning what your influences are, using them in the music that you make. Some practical ways to start looking at how you can integrate your influences into your sound is to chart out your creative family tree, which is something that I picked up from Processing Your Creativity by Jesse Cannon, which is another great book. But you essentially chart out your favorite bands and start seeing where the connective tissue lies. So for me, I grew up listening to a lot of CCM music, but then that also kind of translated into a lot of stuff from Tooth and Nail, which for anyone who doesn't know is a record label here in Washington State, mainly known for a lot of the stuff they did in the late 90s and 2000s for bands like MXPX, Under Oath, Amberlin, Copeland, Emery, POD, Search the City. So like in the punk world, but very much like a Pacific Northwest version of the punk world where it's sad and rainy and everybody's really moody. And then that led me into the Vans Warped Tour world, which is how I got into the early 2010s metalcore scene. And it's funny how it like comes full circle because right now I am currently using a lot of Mixwave plugins, and Mixwave is owned by Taylor Larson, who produced and mixed a lot of the records from my favorite metal bands in that scene. But you can see it's really easy to imagine how you can take one sort of lineage of your creativity and just follow its path, which then goes to the next section, which is combining your influences. What is going to bring out the identifiers in your sound is not how original you are or how you can make this sound that nobody else has ever done. It's going to be how you uniquely balance these different elements from your creative lineage. And so when you look through your family tree, you can almost see it as like a spice rack of things that you can pull from. Let me grab an Underoath style guitar riff and mix it with electronic drums. Let me get a metalcore breakdown and mix it with synthwave. And while that can apply to things in the broad sense, it can also work on a moment by moment, part by part, lyric by lyric level.
So a lot of people disdain and look down at the idea of a copy band. We're going to be all original. Great. If you can launch and be all original band and be huge and awesome and amazing and write great songs, man, I'm your biggest fan from the beginning. But I don't think it hurts at all to learn a bunch of songs and play it in a band. You really get an idea of, what do I do on bass here? Well, what did he do in that song? And a lot of times when we were writing Eat 'Em to Smile down in David Lee Roth's basement, down me, Steve, and Greg, we'd be down there jamming away, and Dave going, yeah, a little more like ZZ Top in this section. Okay, we're gonna be fine. A little bit more Deep Purple. Yeah, okay, well, that's kind of like a Led Zeppelin meets, you remember that song by so-and-so? Oh, yeah, we just would communicate. There was no written music or theory or anything like that. We just communicate by saying, talking about songs we knew and loved and the parts and pieces of them that just did something for us.
The way that you can combine your influences into something that gets you excited, that is going to be how you define your sound. And the more you do this, you're going to naturally find that your sound is going to not off-put some people, but you will find that it speaks really true to a specific group of people. I think one of the examples I used when I was talking to Ryan was, imagine you raise your hand in a room and say, okay, everybody who likes the new Taylor Swift record, raise your hand. And like everybody raises their hand. It's like, okay, now keep your hand up if you also like really fast rock riffs. A lot of people are going to bring their hand down, but some people will keep their hand up. It's like, okay, now keep your hand up if you also like lyrics about science fiction. And it's like, before you know it, you're going to find the people who like the style of music that you like, but it's not going to be this forced branded thing. It's going to be very authentic to who you are as a person. Now, I know some people who might be a naysayer and say, okay, well, what about the bands who just kind of sound like this other band that I already know? Like Coldplay or the 1975 or Blink-182 or Taylor Swift or whoever. There's this massive act, and after that act has like a massive breakthrough, there is just kind of like a large group of people who just sound like them coming out of the woodworks. And what I would say is, if you're finding that the music you're making is sounding too much like an artist that you know, and it's not like you're afraid of people saying, oh, you're not original. It's just like, it's not fun for me to sound like another artist. Keep that influence and just add more spice. Find more influences to throw into the batch instead of just grabbing one. I've also found that going to the complete opposite end of the spectrum from wherever you are currently in can also be really helpful.
I was decent. I wasn't like your level.
Dude, stop saying I'm a good drummer, because I'm the most basic fucking drummer. If you listen to Nevermind, the Nirvana record, I pulled so much stuff from the Gap Band and Cameo and Tony Thompson. All that. That's
wow.
It's old disco. That's all it is.
Can I not hear that?
Nobody makes the connection.
That's straight up Gap Band.
And now some of you might be saying, Seth, okay, I hear you. I understand. I want to use all these different influences. I want to mix and match my artistic family tree into the music that I'm doing. But how will I know if it's right? Like, how will I know if it's like good or if it's bad? And here's the difficult part. You won't. You won't. You just have to experiment a lot. And this is the final thing I want to say, is that for most people, their sound, it's less of like a sculpture and it's more of like a ball of wet clay. Like, there are so many artists that I love that where it's like in my head, they like have a sound. And then I watch interviews and like in the small day-to-day minutia, they don't actually have like an objective, like, well, I can honestly tell that this is exactly what I should release.
I believe this rhythm section, the basic tracks were recorded December 23, 2015. I think I posted a video of this song, and actually I was like, yeah, this is too dark for my vibe. And Ben Rector commented like, whoever your A&R person is, you need to fire them because this is completely funky. You need to put this out. I was like, all right, I'll put it out.
fuck, maybe this is better.
It's quite good.
Pretty good.
If there's one statement that I could use to summarize the idea of finding your sound, it is everybody is just trying to figure it out. Like, nobody has arrived, nobody has figured it out. Like, even with massive budgets and massive label money behind records, there's still people who are just like, I don't know if this is my sound. And that happens all the way at the top of the chain, at the bottom of the chain, and that's just like, that's how art is made. Like, that's just part of the process. You're never going to have this objective process of finding your sound. If anything, one of the main reasons artists probably benefited from like the album cycle era, where that was like the only way that you could like release music, was that it was a great opportunity for you to experiment with a different version of your sound. Like, if you had something about your sound that you didn't like, an album cycle was like a great new way to try something new and experiment with something different. And like, I grew up on rock music, and I heard stories of Rush being unhappy with a record they did where it was all synths, or Kiss doing a disco record. Like, nobody has figured it out. And so what I would say as closing words for people who are making music and are really just trying to do something cool, give yourself the freedom to just experiment a ton. Because everything that we've talked about today, at the end of it all, the result is going to be, well, you just need to like pick up the guitar and write more songs. Like, the only way for you to find out whether or not mixing Viva La Vida style string sections with reggaeton beats and Herbie Hancock synthesizers is you just need to try it. And you need to try it a lot. And so it's a lot more important to find a process where you enjoy the experimentation. You enjoy trying to play with new things. You know, a great analogy is like surfers. It's like, if you want to be technical about it, surfing is a form of transportation. Like, it is moving you somewhere, but like, nobody is surfing because they are trying to get somewhere. Like, they're not using it as a form of transportation. People who are surfing are going to a place and surfing back and forth between the beach and the wave because the process of surfing is fun to them. And so as you're trying to find your sound, don't forget to surf. Start looking for new records. Start looking for different ideas. Keep a notepad of all the different ideas you could try and just keep chipping away at it. And what you will most likely find is your sound will come as a byproduct of you just surfing a bunch and just sort of naturally flowing into the places that you like, bringing in specific collaborators who bring out the best in you, and you'll just kind of settle into a place that is you. So that's my advice. Again, if you're interested on any of the stuff I'm working on for this channel, please join the email list. It's the best way to like keep you updated on things that I'm going to be doing. Also, I love doing guitar reproduction videos, but I also find it really fulfilling to do these kinds of almost like A&R style development videos. So if you enjoyed this, hit like, comment, subscribe, and talk about some other topics that you would like to see. Because talking here in front of the camera for an hour with some notes is a lot easier than remaking a track from scratch. I will see you guys next week.